Hello, everyone. We're back. Another Friday episode. It's a very blustery, windy, dark, and stormy day up where, at least where I am. But doing well. And Elliot, hope you're also doing well.
Doing well.
Yes. I cracked the cork on some Israeli Cabernet, so I will drink
Oh,
that. And the fact that I said that will properly filter our viewership as is needed. Again, when you talk about right-wing things, you tend to get certain kinds of people, and so we're self-filtering. Look at that. Physical removal is
I
a
am.
thing. Allah Hapa.
You know,
Okay.
it makes me think. Actually, we should have a parentheses wine label. But anyway,
Yeah. Well, Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg can have their own wine, so why can't we?
exactly right.
I will say, by the way, I know this is not a wine channel, but that Snoop Dogg, the Snoop Dogg wine is really
It's
good.
actually pretty good.
It's
I was
really good. I
surprised.
really liked it.
I,
So,
I mean, not that I don't think Snoop Dogg could produce good wine or nothing. I was just like, oh snap, this is pretty good.
well, I'm certain he's out there just smoking a huge ass blunt and treading on the grapes. That's how, in my mind, at least, what's happening. That's how wine's made. Cool. Well, we're back, and we're gonna do more of in no particular order because we are weird. We're gonna talk about another one of our sort of principles, I guess. I don't really know. It's not a manifesto, definitely not a manifesto.
Nope.
Principles of the weird right. This is all still
We're trying to come up with a different name, but principles
yeah.
might be the right name. I don't know.
Elliot had floated the idea of litany. I kind of like that because I'm sort of a Dune fan, and there's the litany against fear. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer.
Fear is the mind killer.
Yeah. So I'm kind of okay with litany, but we'll see what we end up calling it. Fear is the mind killer. Lo tira, as the Torah would say, do not fear. All right. It's Friday night.
Fear not.
Yeah, we'll speak some Hebrew. Okay. So this principle, and I'll put it in the little description, is Ellie, do you want to read it because you wrote it, or do you want me to read it?
Sure. No, I can read it. That is
okay. Yeah.
A-okay. Hold on, let me pull it up here in a second. I had
It's
it pulled up,
your words,
and then
so I don't want to take
it's well. The other thing too, while I'm pulling up, is that it's part of a larger sort of. We haven't gotten so cool with our philosophy here that we need like bullet points of sub bullet points of sub bullet points, like some sort of Wittgenstein nonsense.
We're
but
not
basically. We're not quite at that level, but we do have bullet points and sub bullet points at this point, and this is a sub bullet point of it.
To 2 levels of hyper reality simultaneously. So yeah, we'll see how much more we need to layer on before we're done. But yeah.
So this one is not necessarily standalone, but fortunately, the aphoristic way of writing that I've stumbled upon for this is standalone in many ways. So it's good. It says, "Living words self-perpetuate. The logos is the meme of memes, sitting on the right hand of God. In the beginning, there was the meme, and the meme was with God, and the meme was God."
All right. So, I've been thinking about this is of all. So, we're working on sort of like a shared document. So it's all very asynchronous. We every day I see something new from Elliot, and every day he sees something new from me. This has been, I guess I keep saying this is my favorite thing ever, but I'm kind of this is how I react. I'm a very reactive person. I'm very reactionary.
I was about to say.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm gonna make some dad jokes too. But this is also one of the better things that you've written so far. In our musings, in our philosophizing. Not only because it references my favorite part of the Christian Bible, John 1, but also just because I had never really thought, I don't know why I didn't, but I had never really thought of the explicit sort of connection between meme and logos. But I'm not gonna. But before I step in and bogart everything, I'm gonna try to give you the first word, Elliot. Since you wrote this, explain what you mean by this.
No, totally. So this is actually a little bit of a potential, like in my mind, not to pat myself on the back too hard, but this is sort of like a crowning achievement for me. This line right here, because it answers a question that I asked like when I was like early 20s. which is I was reading the Bible one day, and it was saying Jesus is the living word, and that I was like, what the fuck does it mean for a living word, right? Because for words to function, they have to be dead in some way, right? They have to be static. They're written on a page, because what's the purpose of a word? The purpose of a word is to convey meaning between two parties that are trying to communicate with different minds. Essentially, we're not trying to do a whole ass freaking ontology epistemology lecture here. So basically,
we've done some semiotics on this channel before. So this is a semiotic. I love semiotics. This is a semiotic friendly place. So yeah.
Well, and I like to say every argument is an argument about semantics, and once you've agreed on the semantics, you don't have an argument anymore.
Yeah, truly. No, that I would agree.
Right, like frankly, and so basically, like I was like, okay, what would it mean for a word to be living, right? And then recently, I had a partial answer previously, and recently on studying cybernetics and land and memes and all this stuff. Right, like I got the aha. This is a potentially really great way of explaining what a living word is, which is memes, right? As opposed to genes. Genes are literally living words in a certain way, and genes are, the term meme was coined by Richard Dawkins back, in I think the 70s or 80s in a book,
even though we pwn him quite frequently. On this channel, hey, credit when credit's due. Meme.
Well, right, mostly because he's a modernist, which is cringe. But basically, here's the dealio: is that so memes, and I kind of fleshed this out in some of the other bullet points around this point. But essentially, long story short, genes are bits of information that are propagated through bodies, right, across generations. And memes are similar, but for the mind, right? So they're bits of information that are propagated through minds, and we have seen now, viral memes have a life of their own. That is what I would say a living word to be, right? Is that all words are memes, right? Just by the simple fact that they convey meaning, right? And so living words are a word, a corpus of text or of meaning, expressing through verbiage, right, that has homeostasis, right? So it is not subject to just linear decay over time, right? Or exponential decay, however decay works in this scenario, right? It is able to achieve some sort of homeostasis. So what are living words that are self-correcting? Like self-correcting code is another, self-correcting error code might be a version of a living word, and Christ is a living word, hence he is the meme of memes, which is very deep, because you have Joseph Campbell, right, the hero with 1,000 faces, right? Well, the Christ figure is the best possible man, right? And Christians obviously would assert that he is the best possible mythical man as well. Like you put up your mythical man versus my mythical man, he's the best, right? So that's why he's the meme of memes.
Yeah, no, and that then, I mean, people might probably not on this channel. There'd probably be somebody somewhere, some Bible thumping Southern Baptist who gets, say that's quite blasphemous, but it's not, because it's just it's explaining biblical truths with very modern nerd speak online. But guess what? That's how people talk. And Elliott, again, this is one of those things where you're not in my camp, you're not part of my tribe, but you keep making these very theologically deep statements, and that gives me hope. We will get you yet. We have a long history of converting pagans, so we'll work on it. It's okay. Just give it time. We're really good at this, and we're really good at this. Okay.
I'm a happy occultist.
Yeah, no, but it is the snark aside. It's another example of what we in the weird right are striving to do, which is it's a statement we can both mutually agree on and like, even though we interpret the word, so we would interpret the word differently. We would interpret logos differently, probably you and I. As a concept, you can insert it or substitute it for meme in this instance, and it still works. Because we agree enough. We don't agree, but we agree enough on it in order to have meaningful statements.
Right.
And that
Right.
is that MVR. I would say it's part of the MVR, right? It's
Correct.
part. We're
Correct.
finding a minimum viable religion, or at least lingo, right, to talk
Yes.
about larger metaphysical things with. So yeah.
Right, because that's part of the point, is to kind of recast some mythological language in ways that we could bring on either modern occultists or modern sort of tech nerds, right? Like there's a whole wing of people who have never been exposed to theology.
Yep.
And I think that theology needs to be resurrected for the current time and place, not in like a stupid, Shakespeare, updated kind of campy way, but in a genuine, like, hey, we speak current language. How do you in current day English, right, with current day thoughts and techniques and all that stuff, re-explain the gospel, so to speak, for a new era? Go ahead.
Can I do unto others right now? Because this is going to be hard for me. This is something the Jesuits do really good, and that hurts me for saying that, because the Jesuits in my camp have some beef and some history. And well, the Lutherans called him Jesu Vida for a reason. If you know German, that's a pun. Anyhow, I won't translate it. But all that being said, the Jesuits have this idea of inculturation, where you take the gospel, the Christian message, and you make it understandable for people who've historically it was used for people who've just never experienced, who've never been Christian or don't have a Christian culture at all. Although in a modern sense, or maybe a postmodern, a post-Christian Western sense, it's taking sort of like what our culture used to believe and recasting it. Now, some people might say that's cringe. Okay, but
because frankly, are most Christians even Christian anymore, bro? Like, I mean,
well, I'm not gonna purity spiral on that one. Like, who is anything, right? Like, all Christians are sinners. Does that make them Christian? I mean, this is that whole thing, right? Like, wasn't it Nietzsche? It was like the only true Christian was Christ. Well, okay, if you're going to be autistic about it, then yeah, I guess. But all that aside, I mean, memes, capital M. I'm not saying that meme equals logos, but I think they function like what logos meant for early Christians is not the same, but it is similar, and surprisingly similar to how, as you've already been saying, how memes function in our modern day, postmodern POMO online culture. And most people are online, right? Unless you're Amish, God bless you. And you're not watching this if you're Amish. Tell your friend on Roomspringer to explain it to you. It's an interesting episode. That's a joke. But most people are online, right, to a certain extent. And so even if you're not like spending 24/7 online, or even if you don't work online, you kind of know what a meme is, right? Like boomers are sharing memes. And they're the worst memes, God bless them, but they're doing the meme thing, right? It's this perpetuating idea, right? Like you see so much so that you can see a meme, and this is thousands of people have pointed this out, but it's a thing that I like to point out when I'm doing anything sort of quasi semiotic, which is really what we're doing here. We're merging the semiotic and the theological together, two of my favorite things. So again, thank you for writing this, Elliott. What you're doing, memes are designed to where you don't even have to have text. You could have zero text on them, but if you know the template, you know something about the meme already, right? If you see Kermit the Frog drinking tea, right, you kind of know what that meme is, right? And if you see, Giga Chad smiling, you kind of know what that meme is, right? And if you see Nordic Chad versus Mediterranean Chad, you kind of know what that meme is about, right? Like already, right? And so it's this sense. So memes are not just, right, they're not just words in the sense of written words, right? They have sort of this quasi, I don't want to say transcendent because that's quite a strong word, but they propagate across time as a form. And
minds as well, right? Time and minds and cultures too. That's what's been so crazy about memes today, is that, as I've said to other people, and I'm not even said here, am more from the internet, air quotes, than I am from America. I share more in common with a rando terminally online Russian or Japanese or Indian person than I do any boomer from America, which is bizarre. It's the first time it's ever happened. There is a genuine global culture, which is, populist in certain ways, right? Anyway, bizarre times, isn't it?
Yeah. No, yeah, because you could show somebody who's, even if they didn't speak English or you didn't speak their language, if they're versed enough in memes, you could show them meme templates, and I'm not saying you could communicate per se, but you could transmit sentiments and sort of the feeling of what you're trying to say across languages. They're almost kind of like logograms in a way, like Chinese or like hieroglyphic writing, right? Where it's almost like it has a form that's separate from any word that you can fill in what you want into the meme, as long as it doesn't break the meme template. It's, it has meaning. That's not quite so. Our mundane temporal memes are long lasting, at least the good ones. It's hard to know exactly sometimes where they come from. The meme etymologies are always fun for me to to look at, like where, like people who've tunneled and found, like who was the first person who did this one thing online. But they have, they're still temporal, right? They have an inception point, right? Like memes start at some point, even if you don't know exactly who or when did the first, Giga Chad meme or something like that. That's one of my favorite templates. I don't know why. It's just, he's so happy being Giga Chad. But it's clear that, like, you remember a time when that meme, lowercase m, did not exist, right? But what you did here really nicely is you capitalize it, and then you put it in sort of this almost the same exact wording as John 1, which anybody with just a little bit of Christian theological background, you don't even have to be Christian, but just know something about Christianity, is going to recognize what you did there. Yeah. You're not saying, and we're not saying, I would never say
absolutely
are exactly like logos, but they function in a similar way, and it is an analogy, right? One of the better modern analogies to the Greek concept of logos, so we should say Greco-Judaic concept of logos, that I've ever heard. So I will always cite you, Elliott, but I will steal this and use this in the future. I hope you're okay with that. It's perpetuated on into the future.
I love it.
To me, so you pass it to me, and I'll pass it on to others.
So basically, what was I saying? Oh yeah, Jordan Hughes. So part of the genealogy here, the inception of this, comes from Jordan Peterson, actually, who asked the question, and I'm sure other people have thought this too, it's just the guy who I got it from. Do you have ideas, or do ideas have you, right? And that is fascinating, and it basically clinched it for me of like, yeah, okay, so memes really are, do act like genes, right? And genealogy, right? Genetics, right? Things that create, just saying. Point being is that, goodness, that's where I realized, like, you're accepting Christ into your heart, and he is changing, like, your perspective and outlook on life, and he is ruling your life. Well, that's very similar to a lot of internet memes. Once you hear an idea, you can't really unhear it, right?
Oh, it's a good point. Yeah, well, and I will say, that's a very evangelical Christian kind of idea of what conversion is, but it's
for sure.
It works in the analogy. The joke is always, in Lutheran theology, Jesus chose you. Is the joke. I may or may not have made that online a couple times. People get frustrated with me. But that's technically what us Lutherans would believe. But yeah, regardless, right? Whether you are accepting the logos, or whether the logos is like, I'm here and I'm the logos, and now you're gonna experience me, and you're gonna never be away from me. Regardless of your theological stance on that, yeah, that's which really gets to the heart of, I think, what the Peterson quote is talking about, right? That, like, there's this sort of, it's hard to know sometimes whether you have an idea or the idea has you, right?
Well, because we all have examples. Forget Christianity for a second, right? We all have examples of people who had an idea and then they're never the same again, because they've been literally possessed by it, right?
No,
and I'm definitely that way too. like I'm that way too. And then we fight on behalf of these ideas,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
why, right?
Yeah.
It's like
For
the idea
metaphysics.
takes over your mind, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, some of us do. I think a lot of people these days have a hard time imagining fighting over anything metaphysical. And I don't mean like violence. I'm against violence, but I mean like standing up on behalf of anything beyond the material. I think is, I'm not saying for everyone, but I think for a lot of people, that in the West, the decadent West, that's a hard thing for them to kind of understand. Um,
well, well, so fighting and dying, sure, but fighting online. I mean, how much of people's lives are wasted through stupid arguments, right?
Well, I guess, yeah, it's what are you fighting on behalf of? What metaphysics are
It,
you fighting on behalf of? Is it a good one or a bad one? Yeah. Is it worth it or is it
yeah.
not worth it? Yeah, 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 yeah.
So I think you might have wanted to pivot there. I mean, there's
Oh,
certainly more to this, but that's pretty much the TLDR of it,
yeah, the TLDR. Well, the pivot I was just sort of trying to gently nudge was, so then how is, so that's sort of just a great line you wrote. What is weird right about this? That's my next question for you. Because I have some
Yep.
ideas about it, but I'm more, since you wrote it, I'm more interested in what you had to say.
Yeah, okay, that's really interesting. And I would be interested to see, because what's really cool, again, I think we said this last time, but what's really cool about this project is that for the most part, we've had like autistic disagreements here and there about some things, and either are actively resolving them or just agreeing to disagree for now.
Disagree is probably the better option. Yeah.
Yeah. And at some point, we might figure out like ways to resolve some of these like wording snafus. But
Yeah.
there's a few things that are weird right about it, and it's sort of the right wing in general has not had any good artists for a long time. And that's not to say we have had none. It's just like most of them are either procedural artists, like an actor, or like somebody who is really, in my opinion, more of a craftsman. So part of this is to try to bring genuine poetry to the right, which is why some of it's kind of loosey goosey. Some of it's try to do deep philosophy at the same time as compelling prose and poetry, right? So that it kind of sticks in your brain. So those are two sort of surface things that make it weird, right? But to me, the real reason why it's weird, right, is that it is doing what kind of I think is the business of all weird right people, which is resurrecting God in some way or another, whether that's in a monotheistic conception or not. It doesn't matter. And so the point for me is to break from some of the words of the past to defend against the sort of classical right wing, and to defend against the left wing for eternity. Right, because the classical right wing is always going to keep autistically dragging you back. Well, this word means that, and therefore you have to believe this, and trying to keep you within the pre-modern or modern paradigms when we are very clearly postmodern. So part of the idea is to update, like we were saying, all of these concepts in a postmodern framework, which memes definitely are, so that we can start to talk to current day people like ourselves in a way that doesn't feel like we're LARPing, an old timey past, right? And that's not just a feeling, that's like a genuine, like, this is how I might explain God to an AI who has no human experience at all, right?
Or just somebody who lives online. It's actually not a bad, it's really not a bad first level introduction to what the Logos is. I would contend, I'd be perfectly fine with like that as an initial, introduction. It's like a meme, but it's the meme of all memes.
It's the meme of all memes. And again, we keep kind of being stoked about this meme of all memes, but actually I think the more important thing is living words self-perpetuate.
Yeah.
Right. And so it gets back to a sort of program that Land points out, which is hyperstition, right? And a hyperstition is you could think about it like a superstition, but one that begins objectively not real to anybody, but through speaking it, it becomes self-fulfilling. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy that through its mere infection of people's minds starts to become true. So the example is the basilisk that we said in another episode, and the Christ figure is another great example, right? Like I like to say it literally doesn't matter whether Jesus exists or not in a certain way. What matters is that Christians have had the impact on the world that they did. Same thing for Muhammad or like any other religious people, right? Those people, somehow that meme got started of their origin, and nobody's been able to overcome it since then.
Well, and if I may give it's not even a retort, but just my particular perspective.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I love it.
That most people believe that Jesus was a real person.
Right.
But he is not Christ to everyone. He is
Yes.
Christ to Christians, and those are almost like different people, because it's one thing to say he was a person, and it's one thing to say he was a person, but also God. Those are like just very different statements. And I think I made that similar point when we did our sort of Trinity episode. But yeah, no, It's like it's so yeah. I mean, even because there are atheists who accept, or non-Christians, right, who accept the existence of Jesus in history, like sort of the quote unquote historical Jesus, although I cringe at that a bit, at that term, just because it's used by people who make really stupid arguments. But you're right, that is one thing, right, to say. It's a whole completely different thing to say he is God. And of course, this is, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. Many people many Christians have made this point before, that those are very different statements to make. The one that comes to mind offhand, just because growing up enjoying his books, is C.S. Lewis, right? Like
at C.S. Lewis, like liar, lunatic, or
yeah,
Lord.
Lewis simplifies the problem into three options. It's more than that, but it's still the point behind what Lewis is saying is, it's almost like you're talking about different people, right? Because Jesus is, to some people, is just Jesus, but he is Christ to Christians. That is a very different thing, right?
Well, and that's why I always
think about books, right? The Quran to Muslims is very different than just a book that you, right, as a non-Muslim might read for like intellectual curiosity, right? Like I'm gonna start reading the Quran just out of, I have Muslim friends. It's like interesting to read. Obviously, it's a translation. I don't speak Arabic, but that's like academic interest for me, right? Like, but it's not my part of my tradition. But I do recognize that for Muslims it is scripture, right? It's it's almost like it's a different book, right? It's like if you read the Bible, the Christian Bible, for example, historically, right? It can be the same, NRSV translation or whatever, right? But if you're reading it historically, you're not reading it like somebody who's engaged in like Lectio Divina or something like that, right? Like divine reading, of like reading for religious inspiration is not the same thing as reading for historical knowledge or literary quality. It's the same book, though, right? It could be the same book, but you're reading it differently. You're reading the word, for some people that is maybe revealed logos. For some people, it's just a bunch of words in a book. It's the same book, but it means something very different to people. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is there is this, like, it's this whole sort of who do you say I am kind of question, right? Like that, like, so sometimes it's not even a matter of changing your memes, even. It's a matter of changing your relationship to the memes, right? Well, it's a very different. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's very different to say meme lowercase m, to use our terms, versus meme uppercase m, right? So
correct.
Anyhow,
well, no, and I will briefly point out to the Christians, because I think a lot of Christians will have like, oh yeah, we have a special relationship with the Bible too. It's like, well, hold on, because your notion of the Bible is almost totally different than the Muslim notion of the Quran, right? Because the Bible, was agreed upon by a council in terms of the New Testament for sure. And we know that there's like the Apocrypha, and then we know the Jewish stuff over time. But the Quran,
not to mention all the disagreements between Christian groups about what constitutes scripture. Yeah,
exactly. Whereas the Muslims are now, I won't say very clear, because your academic Christians might know that there were like 17 different versions of the Quran with like, or I think 7 different translations, quote unquote, even within Arabic. And then like 11 different or like something crazy like that, interpretations of those, like pronunciations of the words, since it's an abjad. But like the book came in one unit to the Muslims, right? There's no, and it is the like perfectly poetic. So there's a certain sense at which, for me, and I can say this, without cringing too much, right, or at all really, which is that really what we're actually trying to develop is closer to a Quran in my mind for this weird right principle situation, because hopefully it will be sufficiently poetic and tied into itself to not just be section, but to be an elaborate sort of what Christians try to do with the concordance, right? Where it's a deeply interwoven, hyperlinked tapestry, right? But
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, like
that actually happens.
like we'll see. Yeah, no, that's the goal. It'll be like a Blade Runner 2049 interlinked. Yeah, we hope. Interlinked.
We hope.
We hope.
Inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah, indeed. Because it's Friday night, and I'm gonna say Im Yitzhak Hashem. How about that? There we go.
There we go. Yeah. Scare off the other half. See, we're scaring everybody off.
Shout out to my chosen peeps friends. Yeah. You go to Yiddish Bible, you go to Yiddish Torah study for a while, and you just start picking up these things. In Yitzhak Hashem, I will do the thing. People look at you like, what does that even mean? I'm like, oh, sorry, that's Hebrew. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I also like, by the way, for my occult compadres too, just consider like mem, right? Meme, and the Hebrew letter M, right? Fascinating, right? Like all I gotta say is the esotericists immediately are like, oh, let me think about that for a second, because mem, it's interesting, right? Because we tend to think of words as thought, as air, kind of airy, but mem is a water thing. Of course, this is like a cross-lingual pun, right? But come on, man. Kabbalists, that's their whole thing is puns. Like
yeah, that's puns. Yeah. No, and I don't know anything about that. So I mean, I know that is a practice, right, that people do. I just it's not the way that I read the word, right? That's not how. It's not that right, that we being the frozen chosen, we Lutherans don't have a spiritual connection to the word. It's just, it doesn't tend to be this sort of word association. There's not so much of a thing.
I don't know if Kabbalah, especially like Jewish Kabbalah, like proper, like old school, I don't know if that would be heretical to a Lutheran,
I
don't know.
I don't know. I don't even want to speak to it because I don't know much about it. My off the cuff answer is I think it's just when I speak with Jewish friends about it, it seems like we're looking for very different things in the text. Right. Also, important note, and as somebody who's a part-time linguist, when I'm not busy doing this stuff, we don't have, we being the Gentiles, the Goyim, don't have access to the original language text the same way. So we can't, unless you study biblical Hebrew, right? 99.9% of Christians don't have that knowledge. It's probably a little bit lower than that, but still, right? Like most people don't. So you can't find that. Like it doesn't sync. It's not part of our experience of reading scripture. So
exactly,
which is just a thing, right? That's just true, right? Like regardless of how you feel about that, that's just truth, right? Like nobody's opening up. If you have for the Old Testament reading this week, if you go to a Lutheran church, it's not going to be read in Hebrew, right? Unless you're in Israel, because it's like that's not assumed. Whereas that was one of the great things about when I first went to synagogue with my friends, I was like, oh, it's all in the original language, and they're like, of course. I'm like, this is great. I'm like, this is awesome. Like as somebody who studies dead languages, I'm like, well, this is amazing. And for a second, I almost went like, well, why don't we do that? Until I realized nobody would show up. The Lutherans are not expecting that. They're like, well, we need to know what we have to say. And to be fair, the Lutheran Reformation was in part sort of based around allowing people to understand what is
in their native tongue.
Yeah, that's our thing, is the understanding in your native tongue. Yeah. In any case, regardless, all that aside, it is. That's very well said. What is weird about it? Well, I mean, it's referencing high level Christian theology, but then also using literal meme speak. That's weird. That's strange. What is right about it, ideologically at least, is if you think about sort of I think you and I are both running on the Melisian definition
right.
of
Yeah,
of the
exactly.
right, the Melician. I think I said that correctly. Again, much pretension. Very wow. That was a meme. It's not just a belief in hierarchy; it's a belief in hierarchy of hierarchies. And so, even
Yeah.
if you hold words and meaning of words to be important, and we've already talked about how, at the beginning of every single right-wing podcast, it's people arguing over definition of words, which shows you something about the culture, right? That words mean something. We have to have
Right.
common definitions in order to talk to each other. Okay, so if you want to think about that, and then you want to think about the logos to end all logoses, whatever the Greek plural logoi, I believe, the logos to end all logoi, or the meme to end all memes, that is a very hierarchical thing to say. I mean, it's an inherently hierarchical thing to say.
And I think
yeah,
I think the way that you say hierarchy of hierarchies is kind of brilliant because I would say,
I'm also
usually
thinking of miracles of miracles. Anyhow, it's Friday night. All right, keep going. Yeah.
no, but I think it's brilliant because it actually doesn't assume more than it absolutely has to, right? So typically I would say, and it's the way to introduce the idea. So it's different than like actually nailing the deep core essence of the idea. But essentially I would say that a right winger is somebody who believes that hierarchies are natural, exist, and are good, right? Are preferable, and we shouldn't try to get rid of them. But to say that they believe in hierarchy and hierarchies of hierarchies is the simplest way to say it, because that the natural implication is that some hierarchies are better than others, and obviously otherwise what are we talking about? A hierarchy. Right? A hierarchy of hierarchies.
Right. And so if the logos is the self-perpetuating word, and maybe the meme is too, at least on a snarky surface level, maybe. What does that say about the weird right hierarchy? I think it says that this is my take on it, at least, which will be no shock to you or anyone who watches the show, based on my obsession with languages and words, and meanings, is that, well, we care a lot about meaning and transcendent self-perpetuating meaning that produces order in the world and fights against chaos, right? Right. There's a light, to reference a little bit later bit of John 1, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it, which is connected to the logos section from a few verses earlier. I don't know what the meme equivalent would be here. The light shines in 4chan, and 4chan has not overcome it, or something. I don't know what it would be. But the idea is that, right, that the self-perpetuating word that produces transcendent meaning is at the top of our hierarchy, and that it orders, by definition, pun intended, it orders everything.
Well, so actually, we've already written this, and that is totally covered some of our astute listeners, which is maybe only 2 of you or whatever. But point being is that
we love the 2 of you. Yeah.
is actually covered in our last sort of thing that we covered, which is the God has about that what is it, the resurrected logos howling hell. Right. Like I think. Oh, and actually, what's interesting is that I had written this little blurb somewhere else, because I was like, okay, since the theme is Necronomicon, and it's a very deep theme, and since the leftists are the ones who are trying to summon Cthulhu, right? I was like, okay.
Well, hold on a sec. For everyone here who hasn't read all of Lovecraft.
Good point. Go ahead.
What's the Necronomicon, and why are you talking about it here? Let's just, for everyone, lead us into this, Elliott.
Well, yeah, and actually, I think you might understand this better than I do. I kind of know it as the meme version, but basically, the Necronomicon is the evil book, right? That is written in the language of the Eldritch horrors that allows you to summon Cthulhu. But tell me more.
It's the evil grimoire that allows you to bring Cthulhu and all the other elder gods into our world. You shouldn't open it, you shouldn't read it, because it'll, best case scenario, drive you insane. Worst case scenario, do something irreparable damage to our universe. oftentimes if you look at like Necronomicon and sort of in Lovecraft, he just describes it, and it's this terrifying book. In visual representations, right, like in the Evil Dead movies, it's made out of human skin, written in blood.
Yes.
Other, there's other artistic depictions have like tentacles popping out of it, full of weird, nasty occult symbols. The Necronomicon is the book that it's the like the anti-Bible, right? Like it's like all of the bad things in the book. It is not the self-ordering word at all. If anything, it contains many disparate words that all produce chaos, that themselves draw in the gods of chaos. So
it would be the self-disordering word, maybe another way, or the anti-meme, right? The anti-meme of things, right? Like literally, and when you think about it, stuff like intersectionality and whatever, that is the meme that like breaks people's minds apart. It deconstructs your brain as you think about it.
Yeah, no, for real. Yeah,
and so it's to keep it on theme, right?
Those worms get in your brain and they're hard to get out. It's like Wrath of Khan. It just goes right in, and it just it's hard to get out. Yeah.
So I did a very stupid thing, right? And this is part of, not to be too meta about it, but part of this poetic writing style is to actually embody it in a sort of esoteric tradition that exists but doesn't exist, and doesn't exist but exists, right? Like it's just like anybody who started a movement in the 1800s pretended like they got hit on the head by some secret masters or whatever, in the Theosophists case, or Joseph Smith got an angel and whatever. Well, I didn't do any such thing. I opened the Necronomicon, and the ending prayer of a liturgy contained there was, "I hate you and you can't leave."
Yeah. I hate you and you can't leave.
which I don't know if you have any brief thoughts. I could tell the.
Well, I guess I'm still trying to draw.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, right. So again, this is two autists at work. The connection for all the rest of you who for the two of you who are watching is that, right? So if the meme, capital M, is the meme, the self-perpetuating meme produces order, this is the anti-order to that. Okay, the disorder. And so Elliott's whole thing here, which is also again very well written, it's very snarky, and if you know any Lovecraft, you're gonna recognize the references, is I opened the Necronomicon and the ending prayer of a liturgy was, "I hate you and you can't leave." And that, I think, very nicely sums up sort of the left ideology, right? Is that you're the problem, but I won't let you leave. You have to stay here and atone for everything, that whether you did it or not, it doesn't really matter. You have to atone for existing, but I don't want separation from you. I want to absorb you, and you have to, and throwing a little bit of incense at the feet of Caesar is not enough, right? It's not enough to go through the stuff pro forma, right? The struggle session is not enough if you're just doing it just to do the struggle session. You have to
work
believe.
is never done.
You have to believe.
Work is never done.
It's never done. Our work is never done.
Permanent revolution.
Robin DiAngelo has reminded us that our work is never done. And you have to, some of you will know what I'm talking about. Man, that book was just made me feel really smart, at least. It made me feel like a genius. But your work's never done, and you're never done apologizing, and what you're apologizing for will always be something new. It's sort of amorphous.
We will never get rid of racism. Racism will always be with us, right? Yeah. Like, and again, it's sort of like, so the way that it came to me, this is something that a different friend of mine, who is kind of like a brain trust person, where we just talk back and forth about these really deep types of things, and we have a lot of very fruitful sort of meme children, so to speak. But basically, the idea was like, with right wingers, there's a notion of separation, right? So one of the things that's beauty about hierarchy, right, is that it's like, hey, there's a hierarchy between you and me, and you're different than me, and I am different than you. And if you are not trying to be like me, then I don't want you around me, right? Or if you're not being in my tribe, if you're being a dissident, I want you singing a different song at another building. That can either be in terms of exile, excommunication, but there's this general separateness, this general desire to create and maintain sacredness amongst people who are right-wing leaning, right? So we were kind of baffled because there's this notion in America right now of the Great Divorce, and every leftist that I've talked to about the Great Divorce, I'm like, hey, we can't talk to each other. We don't want really to talk to each other. We speak totally different languages, have totally different values. Sounds like we should not be hanging out together. And they say, well, no, you can't leave. Literally, they would say that, right? They would
Yeah, you
say,
can't
well,
leave.
hold on now, like, you're right, like leaving, like that's not the solution. We need to unite. We need to synthesize. We need to,
Yeah,
come together, right? We need to be one with each other. And you say, no, I don't want to be one with you. And you clearly hate me. So
yeah,
why can't I leave if you hate me so much? They hate themselves. They're deeply depressed. They have these horrific mental processes that cause themselves suffering, and they think they should eliminate suffering, right? They think that they should go into the void. Well, the void, one conception of this is the perfect disconnection, but it's also the perfect connection, right? Because if everything is connected to each other, then there's no differentiation from each other, and so it's like a burning up, right? It's like a oversynthesis, maybe, right? And so there is this notion amongst them, like, in the right wingers, they're like, I hate you, you should leave, or I'll leave, right?
yeah.
In the
Or I'll
left,
leave.
they're like, I hate you and you can't leave.
And you can't leave. Yeah. I don't know what that is. Maybe one thought that springs to mind is maybe it's that they've poured so much of their sense of meaning, to bring it back to meaning, into attempting to convert people to their ideology, that when they meet, I mean, there is no shaking of this, there is no shaking of the dust off the sandals and just leaving, right?
Right.
Yeah, there is none of that. It is like that's not good enough. Like, there is not even sort of a transcendent sense of, well, perhaps, the great god Demos will bring them around in the end, right? There's not even some sort of eschatological hope for salvation, whatever that would mean in a leftist framework. It's literally like, no, like you have to convert right now. And in the hilarious thing is there is no the conversion will never be done. I mean, this is clearly just it's a riff. It's Christianity without Christ. It's just the conversion will never be done. The confessions will never end, and we worship a very vengeful, wrathful God who has no love for anyone. So
and I
yeah.
think that is, I think that's all true. I think that I would put it almost even deeper than that as well. I mean, that's true, and this is also true what I'm about to say, which is to say that to allow people to leave or separate or to kick people out would be to purify, to distill, which is the opposite of what they want. They want mixture. They want hollow. They want mud. And I actually point this out in one of the other things, right, which is that they want to create mud, but to, and this is where the lefties get in this weird situation where they both want homogeneity, but homogeneity implies purity. So they want heterogeneity, but heterogeneity includes inequality. So there's this like cacophony, and I mean that cacophony very, very intentionally, of conflicting leftist values that don't allow them to bottom out and resolve, right? So they have these things that are like force them to spin around in circles. In particular, equality and reduction of suffering are two fundamentally orthogonal or at right angles, non-linearly independent or independent, right? Just to throw all those things out there. They're two orthogonal values that do not really allow anybody to get to the point where they can say, we have won, right? And so in that way, they end up as they maximize for equality, then suffering goes up. So they have to then try to maximize for suffering. Well, that causes equality to go up. So they have to then start all over again. They're in this infinite loop of keeping these two things churning around all the time. And if you see this circular revolution that is permanent, then you start to understand the deep need for lefties to continually flip things. Because if everything is one, you can't flip it. So you need things to not be one, right? Which is why you as the right winger are required to be close to them so they can continue to flip you, right?
Yeah. No, and I have found, I'm not going to I'm in no way saying this is how to deal with every single unreasonable person in the world. I am not going to say that this is purely anecdotal. Anecdotal evidence does have meaning, but it's just what I've noticed. I've noticed that people who are not really my friends anymore, but we used to be friends, who are either closer to the left or on the left, when I troll them, they will almost never stop the conversation.
Yes.
Right, because they don't want the separation. Actually that the one of the so an argument against trolling is that the way you truly drive them insane is you just stop talking.
Yes.
And you just leave, whatever that means, right? You switch off whatever you switch off social media, you go do something else, or you just like literally leave. Like you just go somewhere else and you just find new people such as yourself who are far more based and far more fun to talk to. And risk of Uber congratulating you in this episode. I don't want it to go to your head, but you know what I mean? Like that's actually the separation. Like they can't hack it because I had noticed that, but hadn't really figured out why. I think
chaos is codependent and parasitic on order, right?
Yeah,
chaos doesn't know itself as chaos until there is an order to be chaotic and relative to.
No, that's all very well said. So so don't read the Necronomicon, kids, whatever you do, but just know that the final liturgy is I hate you and you can't leave. So I guess what is implied out of that, what's something that's proactive, since we're all pro-actionaries here, leave. And this is a thing that leave in the most, I would add this, leave in the most magnanimous way possible, not necessarily for them, but for you. Leave in a way that the least amount, the least chaotic.
What's the opposite, right? I love you and you can be free, right? Yeah. Like it's frequently said, if you love something, set it free. Okay, I love you and you're free to go.
And that's and if you can't quite muster the charity to do that, and I will say I suffer from that. It's really hard for me to be charitable with people who are very uncharitable to me. I would never interpret turning the other cheek literally, but it is important thing that I have a hard time with metaphorically doing. Sometimes the best you can do is the Irish goodbye, which is just to kind of disappear and dissipate. And if those individuals are affected enough by that, maybe they'll start to sort of reanalyze, well, why did that happen? Why did he just leave? Oh, well, maybe it was something that I was, and maybe they'll have moments from introspection. Probably not likely, but it's again, the Irish goodbye allows you to just kind of go away, which I actually had, to not get super sappy and super personal, but I did have to do that about a year and a half ago, from like most people I knew, because of because of the plague and just everything. It's really can be really hard, but the advantage is that you, in my experience, you will find people, if you actively look, who do care about the things that you care about. And case in point, me and Elliott, we do not agree on everything. We have actually a ton of disagreements, but there's enough values that we hold in common, and that allows for a very fruitful, in this case, partnership, but also friendship.
Right.
That's and it's one of those things where you're like, wow, I kind of just like overhauled my social life, which sucked. But man, I feel better because I don't have to sit there quietly, like sitting through the struggles, what is essentially a struggle session happening in front of me, ad hoc struggle session, right? You don't have to do that. You've separated, you've gone. You're different, right? You're your way. And you don't have to deal with that anymore. And holy crap, is that like 10,000 pound weight off your back? So that was my sharing time. But I think that's just again an anecdotal example of the power of voluntarily and peacefully separating from people. And
Well, because we
yeah.
so consider being a peculiar people separated apart, not of the world, but in the world, right? Like so I'd invite your hardcore Christian members to think about it like that. And of course all the occultists already understand this. Just remain silent, right? Which occultists will know. Both sides have really awesome wisdom on this point. And like I say, at some point we'll publish the full thing, and you'll get to see more than just sort of teaser trailer stuff. But I don't know when this will be finished, honestly. Like it feels like it's kind of just getting going in a certain way,
Yeah.
which is of course very exciting, because it's the chance, at least for me anyway, to kind of be able to put down some of the thoughts that I've been having in a way that feels genuinely fruitful, and that's really really great for me. I saved a copy of the document just in case, because I was like, oh man, what if we accidentally delete some of this, because some of this shit is just real good.
Yeah, no, well, you're talking to Elliot, you're working with a medievalist and an early modernist. And
Yep.
so I make copies of copies of copies. As the 9 Inch Nails song, I am just a copy of a copy of a copy. That is sort of, in some ways, that's, I make copious copies. It will not be lost, I promise.
Wow, that 9 Inch Nails song is intense though, because that is very postmodern, very hyper reality. Like that's pretty cool, actually.
That's the Hesitation Marks album. Good album, by the way. All right, we've devolved into the part where we're comparing and talking about 9 Inch Nails albums. I think that's a good time to stop. We are still very much in the sketch rough draft phase of this. I hope in the next couple months to have at least something out to you all. In the meantime, I recently turned our episode on the Peace and the Feud. I turned it into a blog article for carpeforum.com, where I sometimes blog with other friends. And so I'll link to that in the description if anyone's interested. I essentially distilled it down into a blog article. There's I reference Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and so that's cool. It's hyper real and hyper referential as it should be. So that's what I've been up to. Elliot, anything that you want to plug before we head off into the weekend?
Just the similarly very the continued to be not very exciting spot of the pawn dealer, on top broker of ideas. I'm also gonna put in this sort of like 1800s hymn that I think is a recent meditation for people, both Christian and non-Christian, actually, that just came to my mind as we were talking. I'll give you the link, and if you want to,
cool. Yeah,
in the thing that could be decent homework for people to do.
Yeah, if you're interested, I'll put all those deets in the deets. I'll put them in the details, the description, I should say, underneath the video. Like, comment, subscribe. We know that it's a small viewership, but we appreciate you all. And until next time, take it easy, everyone.